3D printing underwater habitats. We said it was coming.
Welcome to Colonize the Ocean podcast, where we discuss oceanic colonization, exploration, and education with your hosts Adam Jewell and Brendon Traxler.
So, we did a live recently, which if you listen to our podcast, you listen to it as well. Anyway, we were talking about different construction and the future of underwater habitats and stuff along those lines. And one of the things we talked about was 3D printing and how that had been used. You know, they've 3D printed mini subs and they've 3D printed, houses and bridges and everything else. And just the logical step is, hey, if they can print a sub, they could technically print an underwater habitat. And what would that look like? Well, literally, I think it was the day that we recorded that live stream, and that the Deep came out and announced that they were 3D printing parts of their underwater habitat that they're planning on building, or that was the plan. They have the printers for it. So it was like, obviously, that's the case. And so, you get looking at why that makes sense, and there's multiple reasons. And one of the big ones is obviously it's a upfront huge cost to purchase that machinery because it's not cheap still, especially for the large industrial ones. But if you're building, especially if you're building modular ones like we were proposing, as well as Deep is proposing a more modular approach, it makes sense because you can print 100 of those, and except for the filament that it required, it's not going to cost you any more. Whereas traditional building, it's going to be a whole lot more expensive. In fact, they're showing that with some of the houses they've printed so far, that it's a 45% cost saving to 3D print a house versus the traditional form of building them. So if that same math carries over to an underwater habitat, I mean, when you're looking at, some of these, Fabian Cousteau, et cetera, they're hundreds of millions of dollars. If you can slash that by 45%, that's a massive savings. Obviously, the large chunk of that doesn't go to the exterior hull cost, but even if a fraction of that does, it's still a huge savings in the cost of these. And with that, it brings the advent of underwater habitats a little bit closer. So, what do you think about that? Obviously, we are gung-ho. We wish we had the funds to be able to buy an industrial 3D printer like that. And someday we will, because I think that is definitely the path to go for printing all these. But in the meantime, it's interesting and it's fun to play with, and we can 3D print smaller scale ones now and test a bunch of these functionality out and grow from there. And that's the next path for us, is to start 3D printing smaller scale underwater habitats to test some stuff. And I think you're going to be seeing that from ASC in the near future. We shall see, but it's definitely on the roadmap. But yeah, what's your thoughts on 3D printing versus traditional? Are you still sold on using steel, concrete, and the traditional formats of building underwater habitats, or do you think that 3D printing is the future for this path?